welcome to another special edition of the TRC Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 11. My name is Jake, and I'm your host. By the time you all hear it, it won't be anymore, but as we record this, it's Independence Day 2023. So happy holiday week to everyone listening, and to celebrate, we have
1776, we are the champs.
Yep. So happy holiday week to everyone listening, and to celebrate, we have our big mid-season report episode. And thus, we have a packed house here. As always, Ryan/RJM Analytics is here as my friend and co-host. Adam, our very own Dave Grohl. Sean, legend of the analytics community, here after his appearance on the Spring Special show. And Jack/Jimmy Fan will be here to round out the party and will be able to provide us with a unique point of view, being that he was at the historic event we had the other day in Chicago. We've got a lot to get to here, so I'm going to count on Ryan here to kind of moderate it all. So just start where you want, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do what I can, but I think we're just going to have a pretty open, free-flowing discussion, I guess. Let's get right into it with Shane Van Gisbergen. I now know how to pronounce his name, unlike the entire NBC booth. What do we have to say about that and him in particular? I mean, I'm not shocked, but I think it's something that kind of, has taken a couple days to set in, that we really just saw what we saw.
Yeah, I'm really not surprised, in all honesty. I think the new unexpected layout and the new course, it eliminated any sort of advantage full-timers had. And I think really he was in the catbird seat the whole race. He had a good car, good equipment, and had run courses like that before. So he was, I wouldn't say he was a favorite, but he was somebody I wouldn't have been surprised before the race if he had won. Just even outside of that, he's an insanely talented driver. And I think a lot of people going into that race completely discounted that. And
Brett Griffin.
Yeah. And, I think I'm not terribly surprised at all. I think it's not an expected winner, but not a shock like people are making it out to be either.
I mean, it's not in the grand scope of, we know this guy's really good. It's just that, people, and I mean, even some of us were just like, is somebody really in their first ever start going to be able to contend? And, well, there's the answer to that now. And I guess it's, and I kind of felt a little bit like this myself, that, I kind of don't want him winning just because, you're going to get the knee-jerk sort of, NASCAR drivers all suck takes. But I think there's more good for the sport that come out of it than bad. We already have the, all the new Chicago fans. I think like 70% of the people at that race were at their first race. And then now we also have, I guess it's going to be a big thing in New Zealand for him winning. And I wondered if Adam or Sean or anyone want to chime in.
So my impression of the race is that, oddly enough, the weekend was saved by the Cup race. And going in, I thought it was going to be the opposite. I thought it would be a great event filled with lots of eager new fans and concerts and all this hype and pomp and circumstance. But I figured the race would be mediocre at best and a shit show at worst. And turns out we got a pretty damn great race out of it. And since all the other stuff was rained out, that was the only thing that saved the weekend. And I think this definitely opens a lot of doors to having street races in other locations, possibly other countries, although I think we're probably a little bit getting, ahead of ourselves with that. But yeah, I really enjoyed most of the race. The part in the wet at the beginning was fun. I always enjoy that. But the middle part, we'll talk about this more, where they changed the number of laps to go in the middle of the race. I was not a huge fan of the way they did that, but it ended up setting up a more dramatic finish with SVG charging from 18th to 1st on the final run. And that was honestly one of the coolest things I've ever witnessed in all my years watching NASCAR. I mean, that was a track where it was really hard to pass, and most of the guys who cycled up front on strategy had just stayed there, but Shane just mowed them down like it was nothing. And I don't think he touched another car the entire time. He made every pass clean with technical savvy, and it was a treat to watch.
Yeah, I mean, just watching from my standpoint, 11, which is the turn where guys would want to use their bumpers and want to move guys out of the way. He was like one of those only guys that could go in there and just make these clean passes, and everybody comes out in the end clean. It was really, from my angle, it was him, Reddick, and Kyle Busch, the only guys that could go in there and just make these old passes that, aren't ones that are going to be dirty or controversial or cause an incident, whereas other guys tried it and somebody ended up spinning out or going into the little runoff section. So just the way he drove, it wasn't like it looked like he was a veteran. It looked like he had been racing the series for decades. He was a 20-year veteran. So, and just seeing all that was just kind of insane. Like, that was his debut, and he looked like he was a veteran of the series who had been there, done that throughout. It was crazy.
It almost sort of felt like he was almost kind of like holding back earlier in the race. Because, just what he was able to do on that last run. Like, you think, why wasn't he dominating the whole thing? But, I guess the wet in the beginning of it, and then you had this sort of shake-up with all those guys who stayed out of the pits, but he was only running like 3rd, 4th, or 5th before that. And obviously it helped that Reddick and Bell pretty much took themselves out of it, but still, that's just, I think when I looked up with maybe 12 or so laps to go, and he was like passing guys for 5th and then 4th and then closing right in on the top couple guys, that's when I'm like, holy shit, he's really going to win this race.
Yeah, just before that even, like in those first opening stages, like lap maybe 1 through 20, where it was sort of a Reddick pulled away and then Bell kind of came in, it looked like he was gone. He was always just sitting there in 3rd, and before the whole shakeup, he was pretty much on Reddick's bumper, ready to take over for 2nd. And I think he looked faster from that viewpoint. That was before, I think, the technical halfway point, if it was going to 75. He was, looking like he would be into 2nd pretty soon and was going to be catching Bell and probably passing him. And then you got into shake up the cautions, and I think that was really the big test, is how can you get around guys who can pass guys who can't. And he excelled more than anyone, except for maybe the only guys who really had anything for him that was Reddick and Larson, and then obviously Reddick had his own incident. But that's where I think the big difference thing is he was able to get in the back there and still just kind of get past guys and pass them with pretty much ease and not burn out all of his tires doing so, which other guys had issues with, I think.
Sean, buddy, are you there?
Yeah, I was waiting for everybody else to finish.
Just make sure your mic's working.
Yeah. I picked Ben Gisbergen to win before the race on Twitter, and saw that he had qualified 3rd. I don't watch supercars, but I've done a lot of research. Right now I'm working on a model ranking all the touring car drivers in history. I have 5,000 drivers to go through. I've gone through and done teammate comparisons for all the champions and all the drivers from A through E in alphabetical order. I've looked at Shane's data, and it's insane. He has a winning record against Jamie Whincup, his teammate, who is the winningest driver in supercars history, and he blew the crap out of Craig Lowndes, who has the 2nd most wins in supercars history. They were all teammates together for several years. I knew that Ben Gisbergen races much better than he qualifies and always has. Last year, he did not win the most poles in supercars. Cameron Waters won 10 and Will Davison won 9. Van Gisbergen won, quote-unquote, only 7, but then he won 22 races. substantially faster in the race than in qualifying, and always has been. He is substantially faster at the end of the race. From what I have seen in my research, I haven't been watching. So I decided to pick him because I figured he would be faster in the race as he is in supercars. And I know that the current top body is based on the supercars car, and I know that Marcos Ambrose in his heyday for a while was the dominant driver on road courses in the Cup Series, and the cars are a lot more like the supercars cars now than they were then, and I figured that the bad conditions and everybody's inexperience on the track would help him. I'm surprised I called it. I mean, I wish I'd bet on it, but I did pick it before the race. I was not the only person to do that. Merb here actually had him pegged to win a couple months ago, so he was the one really ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I think I picked AJ Allmendinger just because, it reminded me a lot of the type of race that could really turn into a total shit show with just like Indy a couple years ago where he won. And I almost had the team right. And I gotta say, I mean, even though he only got up there on strategy, which I generally don't, I'm not that impressed with usually, but Justin Haley, the way he was able to really fight for the lead after SVG passed him initially, he got back by him for a turn or so. I thought that was really impressive and probably one of the best races of his career. Between that and also being able to hold off Chase, who I guess his car was damaged from hitting the wall earlier, but still, anytime you can get track position at these types of races, and I mean, who's not to say that if Chase had qualified up in the top 5 that he would have run there all day. So I'll admit I was kind of rooting for Haley to win for a little bit, just because it's like with these guys who just win their way into the playoffs, it's almost preferable to have somebody is going to be a first round exit as opposed to somebody with 2014 Ryan Newman potential who can just totally stroke their way through.
Yeah, but it might have kept Elliott out.
Would it though? All he needs to do is win one race.
Oh, he might bonus win at this point. He's not far back.
And we still have Watkins Glen. We still have Atlanta next week.
In the road course.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw something that said he needs to basically average, finish-wise, he wins a point in, basic calculations, like a 9th place finish overall every week with no stage points. So keep in mind that's him finishing 9th, basically without even getting stage points. He would
that's
make it.
He can do that in his sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not terribly worried. I am, though, worried that he's just, still not performing like the type of driver we know he is, but I won't spend too much time on him this week. He's been extremely lucky these past couple weeks getting some of these finishes. He's got like the second best average finish in the whole Cup Series this year, but I would probably not even say he's been like a top 10 driver this year. So yeah, it's almost maybe a better thing if he misses the playoffs and Allen finally gets fired. So whatever. That's enough I'll say about him this week.
I'm trying generally just stay out of this because the scope of this episode, but I'll just try to summarize all my thoughts about Shane and the race here. As for Van Gisbergen, who I call Van Gisbergen last week, I honestly did not know how to say his name either, which I'm normally pretty good with names and pronouncing them, but that was one that got me. But I still did better than NBC, so we'll give it that credit. And I did a lot better than Joey Logano did, so that's something. But anyways, I'm surprised but not shocked, I guess, by it because these supercars, as has been noted by a lot of people before, are very similar in their construction to NASCAR race cars, especially the Gen 7. The transmission is almost exactly the same. It's a V8 engine. There's no traction control in supercars, just like there isn't in NASCAR, which I think that's something that guys that come from other series, other race cars, especially sports cars, that's a struggle that they have because they're used to having that kind of forgiveness, that kind of, protection from wheel spin that they get in their other series. And even though series like F1 and IndyCar, technically, even though they don't have traction control, they have these big rear wheels that basically act like a form of traction control. And I think that's why they really struggle and why guys that can, like Van Gisbergen, that can run in supercars, can do better and can translate to a sport like NASCAR better. And so, not to mention that he's raced, apparently, not that I'm, again, some enthusiast or biographer of his. I couldn't tell you about, his whole history or whatever, but he's raced just about everything there is to. He's been in sprint cars. I think he's even been in rally cars before. So he can do it all, clearly, and he showed that on Sunday. So, it did seem like he was just toying with the field for a lot of the race, which he wasn't. He said that he struggled at first on the wet tires because he wasn't used to that kind of thing, and then he didn't do well on the initial period on dry tires, but after that, once he found his footing, he was pretty much the only guy that was making repeated passes because, this was a race. It wasn't bad overall, but it was, there was not a lot of passing as we expected there wouldn't be. And so he went all the way from 17th to the lead on track, and, there's nothing you can say about that. He earned it. He deserved it. And going into the weekend, I was kind of like Ryan. I didn't really want him to win because I didn't, want that kind of look for NASCAR. This guy to just come in and, beat all these guys. But then I thought, well, idiots are going to be idiots regardless, and they're going to say what they are going to no matter what. So, just it's best to not even give them the time of day. I will say it was amusing what Brett Griffin had to say during the race. And then by the way, if you'll notice, he immediately did a 180 right after the race. He was all complimentary of him after he won it.
This Shane guy.
Yeah. He said, somebody probably told him that it was good for the sport, and he believed them. So, but I think he was off.
I'm very proud that I earned the blocked by Brett Griffin badge of honor like 5 years ago. For bringing up Spingate.
Yeah, I think he was off drinking, I think, in Myrtle Beach the time when it happened anyway, so whatever. But yeah, I think in the end it will be a good thing for the sport because obviously it's going to create more interest and buzz around where he is in Australia and New Zealand. And the fact that it happened at this place probably, which we'll get to probably in a minute, helped even more. And so in the end, I'm not excited about it in the sense like I'm a fan or anything, but I think it's probably a good thing for the sport. And I felt a lot different when it actually happened from what I thought I would before. As far as the actual race itself, now I made my feelings clear on this event last week. And, I'm salty about the fact that Road America was taken away from it. And and I was not a fan of this idea, as a lot of people weren't going into it. And while I still can't say I'm crazy about it, it did kind of exceed my expectations in some ways. And I genuinely liked the first half of the race, I guess you could say, in the part in the wet. For the kind of track it wasn't bad. It wasn't a ton of passing, but, you expect that. And it wasn't actually that chaotic, other than Noah Gragson pulling a Brian Vickers over and over. But about midway through, my opinion started to really change because we started getting just caution after caution after caution that just seemed to just take forever. And that's when we got the race shortened from 100 laps to 75, which was, a big bummer. And it was just one of those things where it seemed like we got 5 minutes of racing for every half hour there was. And that just, every time that happens, it grates on my nerves. And this place is not special in that, because that's happened at a lot of places. It happened at COTA earlier this year, and it irritates me. It definitely negatively affected my view of the race a lot. But I'll still say, in the end, it was probably a success, and I'll eat a small amount of crow, and I still don't have a really high opinion of it, probably still have a lower view of it than the rest of you guys do. But I'll acknowledge that it was probably a good thing for the sport, and it wasn't a total disaster. So,
I kind of feel like Shane winning sort of clouded a lot of that, and I mean that's why I'm glad he did at the end of the day, because otherwise the narrative is, it was raining all weekend, nobody could stay out of the tire barriers, there was no passing, and it would not have been the greatest reflection on all this. And I think him and that whole narrative really saved the weekend almost. I'll point out, did I not call it or what last week on Noah Vickers, basically forgetting how to turn in turn 6 every single lap. And he wasn't the only one. Truex, of all people, had a pretty embarrassing race after that first stint. Which
the thing about Truex was he started off really good. Like he was
great in the wet.
And I was like, he's gonna have a chance to win this. Like I thought halfway.
I thought he looked like the best car on the open stage.
Like he was making passes. He was passing people in 11. But I think he did 3 straight laps at one point, just passing guys left and right. And I was like, he might be the guy to beat here. And then I guess it was when that caution came out and the guy got shuffled back there. He just turned into a wrecking ball, I guess. So
I think the biggest thing that left a bad taste in my mouth though was that huge stack up with, I guess Byron started all of it, driving into the wall, and then Harvick and Corey LaJoie blocked the whole track. And for whatever unknown reason, NASCAR decided to give every single driver their spot back, even though there were like 10 cars that were all bunched up and stuck in the wall. And then even more when Harvick decided, the most on-brand Harvick thing I've seen ever since he tried to wreck Kyle Busch at Martinsville just to make it into the championship 4, drives across the track so that nobody else could get through and so that he would stop losing spots. So
don't forget him trying to right hook Larson at Bristol that one time too.
Oh yeah, there's nothing the guy won't do if it benefits him in the slightest.
But he'll be gone soon.
Yeah. One last couple of notes that I wanted to give on the race also is that a thing that I really helped it. We don't like them to do this normally. We didn't like it when they did it at Bristol Dirt a couple of years ago, but it was very beneficial in this instance, was them doing single file restarts all races instead of double file. Now, it's not a good idea. I don't like when they just make these rule changes on the fly, basically because they feel like it sometimes. But this, as bad as it already got in the second half of the event, that really saved it, I think, from being a total disaster and shit show. Because especially, with it being wet at the beginning, this race, I think, would have been a disaster, a catastrophe if they'd done that. But they wisely, I think, made an on-the-fly decision here that made it a much more enjoyable experience. And the other thing I wanted to add that I forgot to say on Shane is, I guess it shouldn't be as surprising what he did, because we do have to remember that this was the first time that he was on this track. Obviously, it was the first time for everyone else, too. None of the NASCAR guys had been at this place either, and so that pretty much mitigated whatever advantage they would have had. So those are the 2 points I just forgot to make that I wanted to, but now we'll proceed.
Mm-hmm. I guess the other thing about that is, the people that are going to be saying it's a bad look for the series are more likely than not big fans of another certain racing series that had an entry in there and was not relevant the entire race. And it was not supercars. And I'm sure they're flipping out about how much passing there was, because that's uncharted territory for them. But they could say what they want.
And he wrecked himself coming into the pits too.
Yeah, because somebody was driving too close to him, I'm sure. He decided to cut right across the hood of its car. Yeah, but they have a track record in the series, and it's not pretty, let's just say. So that's all that needs to be said about them and those guys that are going to be going out there and saying it's a bad look.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything embarrassing about this at all, because he has been dominating everywhere. He's been racing for years, and it's not like there have been a ton of name entries in NASCAR lately, from Jenson Button to Kimi Räikkönen to Jordan Taylor to, I guess, sort of Daniel Kvyat, and none of them really did much of anything in any of their starts. So, if anything, I think that NASCAR has been starting to get a lot more cred from the F1 fans, especially after the Ross Chastain move and how much praise he got even for that, even from F1 drivers. I think the F1 fan base doesn't really hate on NASCAR anymore. I think there's actually more hate vice versa. Now, people in the press and the media, that's a different story because mainstream press seems to be a lot more snobbish than the actual fan bases these days. But it's not like this was a mediocre sports supercar driver who crossed over and won. It's not like Bryce Fullwood came in and dominated all the Cup drivers. Have you ever heard of Bryce Fullwood? That's the point. Now, I imagine there's going to be a mad rush of people trying to hire supercars drivers, your Wares and your Spires and teams like that are going to try and get a bunch of supercars drivers or future road course starts, and I have a feeling none of them are going to come even close to replicating this. I know there's a lot of talk about Brody Kostecki crossing over. He's the current supercars points leader, and in my opinion, the most overrated driver in the world. He won't, even though he has some NASCAR experience. He drove in some of the K&N series like 7 or 8 years ago. He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't contend at all, I think. This was a rare one-off. It's not like there aren't lots of stars who haven't been doing anything. If anything, getting international talent in the series is only a good thing, and nobody should be embarrassed by it at all. The only embarrassing thing would be if it was some mediocre driver from a Major League Series somewhere else who did this. That would be embarrassing, but those sort of drivers wouldn't even get the call to be in a Cup race in the first place.
All right, let's let Adam speak here because he hasn't in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, kind of alluding to what Sean said, this expands the footprint of the NASCAR talent pool, I think, to other series across the world. Because, as soon as the race was over, Shane said that, he's stuck in his contract in 2024, which might not even be true now, and that he would love to come race in the States after he's done with supercars. And I think that just goes to show that NASCAR is now attracting international stars from all over the country, and that it's a desirable series to race in for guys who have been successful in other disciplines. And I think that's, we've come a long, long way from the days when it was just a bunch of Southern good old boys running their moonshine to now we have people from all over the world, successful, world-class drivers from all over the world want to come here and give their shot. I would personally love to see him in a full-time Cup ride. I'm hoping it happens at least by 2025. And I don't know that he would do particularly well outside of road courses, but it would be really cool to see. And I think just in general, this is good for the sport. Good for the racing world as a whole, I would say, because look at all the attention that has been brought to it.
So one last thing I wanted to ask before we potentially move on. I know you were at the race, Jack. So just tell us kind of your general thoughts on your experience there and, what you think it might bode for the future.
Yeah, I mean, part of it he couldn't really tell. I mean, you could see what the concert venue was going to be like, what the whole layout of that was going to be. And I think that was going to be great if the weather permitted. I think that would have added tons of people would have been there. Like some of the shots, you would have seen that whole area by the Ferris wheel just full of people like it's Indy Snake Pit. And even with that, it was still a pretty well organized event. I mean, you had the incident on Saturday with officials telling people to leave and vice versa, but the layout was good. Even if you had a GA ticket and got the cheapest seats, you could get some pretty good vantage points, at least for a certain turn or a certain part of the track. I thought it was a street course. I think as someone who's been to the St. Pete street course in the past, there's a lot of similarities there, and I think the layout was pretty good for to just be able to walk around, go from point A to point B pretty easily. So I think the one thing was we were 11, so we had to cross one of the over the track tunnels to get there, and there was only one of them to get to that whole section of seats. So when you let out, you had to basically run to get out there. Otherwise, it was going to be a full-blown traffic jam. But outside of that, track was nice. I thought it was a really nice, overall layout for a first-time event at that area. So I really enjoyed it. I think they talked about being like a festival-like atmosphere, and I think it did. Even without concerts, I think they did still kind of have that, and had the ways of getting, the fans that don't really know a lot about the sport kind of semi-aware of what's going on and what everything means, which I think was a good thing too. So I'm really excited for next year, hoping it comes back and all goes to plan with the weather, and I think it's going to be a really big hit just for the hardcore fans and the casual fans.
Yeah, I thought that was probably one of the best things about the weekend was just the way NASCAR was really going the extra mile to accommodate the fans, and the fans really seemed into it. You could hear their reactions when SVG took the lead, and when he was making passes late in the race. It was like watching a college basketball game or a hockey game where you have the fans really, really getting into it, and I thought stuff that they were doing, like the Bubba Wallace had like this big block party festival type of thing, and then they had like the Michael Jordan show car on display there, and it just really looked like this was a success in terms of reaching a new market that could have some staying power as fans.
I'm mostly at
I
peace
don't
with it.
think though we do need to kind of temper our expectations as far as street courses in general go. I think there shouldn't be any more than one or two a year, two at the absolute most. And
I think two is a good limit. I mean, the one other funny thing I kind of thought of now was in 11 during the cautions, they would always send like a cleaning, drying truck, and people would go crazy. Like they'd be cheering, they'd be getting standing ovations, and it's a cleaning truck going by. Eventually, they were just kind of honking at us, so that was a pretty cool thing to see. Just even when there wasn't actual racing going on, people were still engaged and making noise for something that's completely not related to even the actual racing. So it was a small little thing, but something I thought was pretty cool just to see.
I'm mostly at peace with it after this weekend. I mean, I still hope RA comes back at some point, but we'll see. I do hope that for the people there at Chicago that next year they'll get to experience like the full extent of what NASCAR can really be, because they didn't really get to this weekend because the Xfinity race, which we haven't even gotten into, basically was basically a no-show, a no race almost, a non-event, and then the Cup race was only three-quarter distance of what it was supposed to be, and it was as much as we may complain about sometimes, double file restarts is a feature of NASCAR racing normally that they didn't get to see either, and so I hope that next year it will work out to where the fans can really get their complete money's worth with a true NASCAR experience, which they only got like maybe half a taste or half a bite of it this time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's...
Yeah.
You can go, Adam.
Yeah, I personally think that we should try to have one street course per season, and we should go to a different city, if not every year, then every other year, because, like Jimmy was saying here, the excitement that was built among people who had never been to a race before is really cool. And like, I know, like, just from browsing social media that the opinions of people from Chicago who came into the weekend thinking, they're invading our city, this is a joke. A lot of them flipped, and a lot of them ended up really enjoying it and embracing the whole thing. And I think that would be awesome if we could bring that experience to cities across America who otherwise would not have access to NASCAR. Like where I am, I mean, if they brought a race to Denver, that would be amazing, because the nearest track to me is like 800 miles away. So that would give a whole market full of fans the NASCAR experience that they would not otherwise have. and I think that's nothing but good for the sport. And I'm willing to sacrifice a small amount of race quality in order to do that, because I acknowledge that street races are not usually all that great from a racing standpoint, and this weekend was probably the high end of what we should expect, because the rain made the racing more interesting and the sense of urgency with the race being shortened and all that. But still, I think it would be good for NASCAR to keep doing this.
Mm-hmm. Denver has or Colorado, where you are, has a big short track scene there, doesn't it?
Oh, there's a pretty big short track scene, yeah.
Racing isn't totally foreign there the way it might.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not like North Carolina or anything, but there's a very popular short track in my area that gets tons of fans every week, and so yeah, that would. There's definitely a market for NASCAR here.
Yeah.
I think a lot of cities, even if they haven't even historically hosted an event, or if historically not really been a racing town, I think if you were to have an event on the streets of their downtown now after this weekend, it's going to be something that there'll be those people that won't be for it, but I think a lot more people will immediately kind of be, this is going to be a cool event. I want to go see it, and not as much of they're invading the town like it was alluded to earlier. It's something I want to see and something I want to, be able to witness. It's never happened here before. I'm thinking of cities like maybe even Seattle or something where there's never been any. I don't think has there ever been a race there? Even the state.
Well, in the Pacific Northwest area, they have Portland.
Yeah, in Portland, but the Cup Series hasn't been there in ever. So if you put a race somewhere like that, Seattle, Pittsburgh, I've seen thrown around, Denver, I've seen thrown around, somewhere like that, it's gonna be a huge hit like this was.
Yeah,
and I think it obviously it helps diversify NASCAR's image a lot. Just the way that something like the LA Clash Coliseum race would. It's a new market, a new sort of city background of people. I'm not really trying to say anything more than just that, but it's helping kind of erase some of the stereotypes of we only appeal to one demographic of Southern white good old boys, and to have an Australian driver or New Zealand driver win the race, a British driver in the race, and all kinds of guys from different racing series, and I think that's something that you can't deny NASCAR has done a much better job with, even if there's still some things that sometimes happen that give the sport a bad look. Thinking about the Brandon Brown thing, I guess, but it's they've gotten so much better at getting around to trying different things, and getting new people to think, hey, this isn't the walking stereotype that NASCAR used to be. So yeah.
Yeah, they gave. I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, beyond just the fan outreach and, busting cultural stereotypes, I think it's important for NASCAR to have schedule diversity. And that's been one of the best things about the current regime, is that we've had new, innovative track configurations and destinations for the last 5 years or so, which we never had before. You look at how static and stale the schedule was for 20, 30, 40 years. There was the same handful of tracks in the same spot on the schedule year after year after year. And I think we have really gotten away from that, and that's awesome. And I would love to see more of that, not just for big cities and street races, but just more trying new things and racing in places that we would have previously considered impossible.
Yeah, actually to parlay in that point, that got me thinking. I know for a fact that Gateway sold out and that the Nashville race sold out. Now, I'm not sure about Sonoma or whether this race was a complete sellout, but I think it was pretty close. 5 years ago, you could not have gotten a NASCAR race to sell out, I think, if you paid everyone $100 to go. But the fact that there's that level of enthusiasm and interest now is a really great sign for the sport that we honestly thought, would never happen again. And the other thing I was going to say is they did have a poll afterwards, I think, that they gave for the fan council. I think it was a list of, 9 or 12 different cities as options for places for NASCAR to race in the future as a street venue. Now, I don't think it has anything to do with the decision they're going to make. It was just, basically a question that they were asking. But this is just a pipe dream of mine. It's not going to happen because it wasn't on the list. It's not a big enough market, blah, blah, blah. My pipe dream is for them to race. If they're going to have this race in Winston-Salem, a place that I don't live too terribly far from, because that used to be a huge integral part of the NASCAR community. But after, the Winston sponsor left the sport, it seems like as far as big series races go, besides just, the local races we have at Bowman Gray, it seems like it's a place that's been totally forgotten. And that, I think, would be the perfect way to bring it back. But that's a whole other thing, not even relevant to what we're discussing, so I'll just end it there.
Yeah, I was going to say something about what Adam said, but I forgot because he made a funny comment.
Was that about that?
Oh no, just about the schedule diversity. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I
said it before, but I think we have really the perfect balance right now. We don't need to become IndyCar where there's only like 5 ovals on the schedule, but and NASCAR is never or should never be anything less than at least like a 3/4, 4/5 of the schedule being ovals. But I think one or two street course races, then maybe 4 other road courses. A dirt race, like a real dirt race, please, not the Bristol thing.
Knoxville,
and then I think just even in terms of the oval tracks, I think you only need like 4 super speedways. Does Talladega really still need 2 dates? And Atlanta,
they'll sell out every time. It's a thing. They sell out, or they'll have enough to keep it. It's a problem. I mean, there is races where you could easily say, I'd love going to Richmond. I've been there a couple times, but they don't sell out. And I would be one of the if you went back to fall, your normal like classic September night race, that would sell out. It's just putting it in the middle of summer. This upcoming race in the middle of summer in July it's not going to sell out. I mean, I might be able to go, but it's going to be 90 degrees, I'm assuming, and baking hot. Like that's the only real complaint I have right now is with that. Like, it's at least put it at night. Like, if it's a Sunday night race or a Sunday late afternoon, like we had last week and coming up this week, like, okay, fine, that's cool. But it's like, I don't know. There's a couple issues I have, but overall, it's probably the best schedule we've ever had in terms of just the diversity, the venues, everything. It's like you said, it's a perfectly good balance, and that's what we need.
Yeah.
I think there's a few little things I'd always say for the next year, like you're never going to get your perfect dream schedule, but we've gotten pretty close, and I think we can get a little closer, at least in the realm of reality. But yeah, I think I'm a huge fan of the schedule so far, and the moves that have been made since 2021, moves have been made since then have been all in all pretty good. The only one I would complain about is road course at Indy. I'm always been wanting to kind of be more towards the oval, but there's all kinds of issues there, and I'm not going to get into that. But overall, it's a great schedule. I've been really, really pleased with what we've gotten these last couple of years.
So, before we move on, I guess, to analytics or whatever, Sean, I think, is the only one that hasn't spoken on this particular thing. So, what are your thoughts?
I'm fine with the schedule. I think that it is sort of like what IndyCar was in the 60s when it was at its peak, where it was mostly ovals with a handful of road courses, and the Pikes Peak Hill Climb was on the schedule, and it had some interesting diversity, and then there was dirt and pavement. I'm talking IndyCar in the 60s, not what it became lately. Now, the thing with IndyCar lately is that NASCAR and ISC own all the tracks. So that's why you will never see NASCAR go to that skew of two-thirds road courses, because they have the ovals and they make money from the ovals. At least their own, the ISC tracks, not the SMI tracks. So other series would have to sell out in terms of attendance. NASCAR doesn't, at least on the tracks that it owns. So I don't think you're ever going to see a mass exodus of ovals. But yes, adding a few more road courses and one street course, I would limit it to one a year and see if you could make it some sort of iconic event. But anything more than that would probably be too much. And I don't think you'd want to create such a skew where road course drivers have an advantage. I mean, we saw this in IndyCar in the 90s and later, where great drivers couldn't, like Ari Lyondike and Dan Weldon, couldn't get full-time rides because they weren't good enough on road courses. Something like that should never happen in NASCAR, but it's never going to anyway.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's diversifying the schedule, and then there's completely losing their roots, which, that's going too far, and thankfully I don't think that'll ever happen. Anyway, if we don't have anything more to say about that, let's just, I guess, go into the analytics and all that.
This was exactly halfway for the. Sorry, this is exactly halfway for the season, 18 races, and so that's why I wanted this to be the big report, and whatever kind of summarization that you guys want to make of the season, any kind of big analytics or deep dive you want to do, tonight's the night for it. So
yeah, I think there's a lot. I won't do the whole thing right now. There's just been a lot, I think, that in the one half of the season, it's kind of felt like a full season with all the different storylines that have emerged, all the surprises, all the twists and turns. I think there's a lot everybody can bring up, and I'll let people point up some others here, but yeah.
Sean just had his updated model he posted about today, and he'll be telling us about that in a bit, but he had, as far as my numbers are concerned, even though he had a pretty embarrassing race on Sunday, it's still Martin Truex by a pretty sizable margin, who is leading my TDR, and then it's a dogfight for second back through about 10th. William Byron still is second, but Kyle Larson closed the gap a lot this weekend, and he still is probably my pick as the best overall driver this year. If he doesn't have those outlier, really awful scores at Fontana and Dover because he had something happen to him early, then he would be leading. I guess I'll let Sean talk for a bit.
I mean, I almost don't want to report on my results. You've seen the results, so.
Well, his are, to be fair, yours are much more, not really accurate if you have a smaller sample size.
Yes.
Yours are much better for defining full careers, whereas I think mine are better for defining seasons. So.
No, I agree with that. Yes, I chose to, for my models, do it based on teammate head-to-head comparisons, where both drivers finish the race, so I remove the NFs. But obviously, that's going to be a little better than average finish, because obviously average finish counts the NFs, but it still leads to some rookie results in the short run, especially because NASCAR, far less than any other series, properly rewards performance in terms of the finishing order because of all the mad scrambles. Maybe Formula E comes close in that regard too, but yes, I do think head-to-head finishing records will, for the most part, average out over years. Yes, I still have drivers who are far too underrated, like all the Penske drivers and Tyler Reddick, but I think the career numbers for most others are good. But and I also do all series at once performances against teammates in all NASCAR divisions. So hilariously, the current leader of my model for this year is Josh Williams, because he had a 5-0 record in Xfinity, and that included beating Ross Chastain twice. Obviously, he never outperformed him, and that took Josh Williams to a career positive rating. Obviously, it's impossible to know how good anybody like that is, because they wouldn't have equipment to possibly do anything, so I don't know what on earth to make of that. Now Chase Elliott was the leader among all the Cup drivers. I'm not surprised that happened, because at the second best average finish, he has a winning record against all of his teammates, even though they've all outperformed him except Bowman. And even that's debatable. Bowman and Elliott have
Bowman's ahead of him in TDR, although both of them have missed races, so it's hard to say.
But yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. Elliott has led my model before. He had the highest rating among Cup drivers, I think every year from 2017 to 2020. Although we might have been behind Harvick in 2020. That's varied when how I've calculated it. And I think all 4 of those years he was substantially better than he is this year. I think this is so far the worst year of his career even. But so it is kind of ridiculous he's leading that. But there were some drivers who were revealed as being really good, which seemed to be completely justifiable. Like the second overall driver in my model was Carson Hocevar, and that seems to be totally legit. He has only lost to a teammate once this year who has made a Cup start. I only include drivers who have made at least one Cup start. But he's 3-1 against Ross Chastain, and he genuinely has outperformed Ross Chastain in those races. So there is something to be said for that one. Unfortunately, he isn't very likable, but he's going to be a big star, and he debuts in my model with a 0.1 rating, which is on the border of like very good. Maybe great's a little higher, but 0.1 is probably about very good. It's about where Bell and Byron are. Now, Byron is obviously much better than Bell, but Bell what he does is collect finishes, and that's what he's best at, while he is worse at many other things.
Oh yeah, I was going to mention that about the race last weekend with Bell, where he had the best car and then was pissed off about the shortening the race when there were guys who could make it to the end on fuel and he couldn't. And then, of course, instead of driving back through up all of them like Van Gisbergen was able to do, and like other guys were able to do, Larson and Reddick, he instead just whines about it on his radio the whole time and then crashes himself into the barriers. That's a real winning driver mindset right there, and just had to get that in.
It's funny that the only one of the Gibbs drivers not to crash was the rookie.
Yeah, and he had, in my opinion, one of his best races. Actually, I believe it was his best score for this year. It easily was his first top 5 and first top 10 TDR finish of the year. That's the other important notes about my analytics I was going to make. Truex not only is leading in TDR, but leading basically everything. He's leading all the passing metrics and has been since pretty earlier in the year, which is when I was really first starting to notice him. He wasn't running up front every week, but that was because he wasn't getting the chances to run up front every week. He was constantly having issues, getting mired back in traffic, bad pit strategy, and ever since he's now gotten some stability, I guess starting around Dover or so when he won, he's up there every single week until Sunday when he just decided to channel, was not the Truex that we're normally used to seeing on road courses, especially. William Byron is the average running position leader, but Truex is the is the XARP leader, which combines average running position and then pass differential as well as caution pass differential, to basically estimate what a driver's average running position theoretically should be. And the only other thing is EARP, which is another different average running position based metric where it's basically a score that combines running position, the weighted score that I use, and then also takes into account equipment. And somehow Kevin Harvick is leading in all that because how bad SHR has been. But that's basically the only stat where Truex is not leading. So I feel pretty comfortable saying either he or Kyle Larson have had the best season and are probably the two championship favorites right now. So
yeah, okay. I know he's not the.
I think
one,
I mean
sorry,
Larson to me has felt like one of the. Maybe he's not the best, but he's been, in terms of sheer speed on a weekly basis, he has to be right up there. Anywhere we go.
Yeah, with Larson, it's more of an eye test thing. It's more of a case of, this guy has the highest ceiling of anyone in the field, and that's obvious.
Right. I mean, there's been a couple of races where he should have won before. I mean, he's won 2, which is good, but he probably should have won Las Vegas. And, I mean, Byron earned that wins too because he dominated, but I should have won that. And there's been a few other races where he's been, the winning speed and something happens, whether it's crew hurting him or someone wrecking him because they couldn't get around him, I guess. It's been a whole bunch of weird incidents. I'm glad he has a couple wins just to worry about, missing the playoffs because of all the bad luck. But yeah, he's seems a lot like last year, sort of to a degree, where he has a lot of good winning speed, but then things happen. And
he's been better than he was last year for sure. I mean,
it's been better.
Last year, his season felt like a better version of Chase this year, where he was just like, something's there, but it's just not showing up for whatever reason, other than maybe once every couple months. The other thing I kind of feel like is that Hendrick maybe is not as fast as they've been the last couple of years.
I'm going to touch on that in a minute.
Not lately. At the start of the year they were, but I think Gibbs clearly is the fastest team ever since the past couple months or so. There's been a lot of races where
I'm going to touch on that.
Where Larson has just kind of run 10th or even worse than that for the first half of it. Like the Coke 600, he was terrible early on, and somehow they got that turned around before he wrecked late. But and Nashville was another one.
They definitely have got to get better at the beginnings of their races and not have to play catch-up all the time. I don't really know what the reasoning for that is other than just Hendrick maybe being slower in general, but still compared to the other drivers, it needs to be better. But before I kind of let Adam speak and maybe Sean some more, this season, I'm not the analytical expert on here, of course. I'm the guy that's kind of like the everyman or whatever you guess you could say on here, but this season has followed more of what I would expect to be a typical pattern for a season, in contrast to just the craziness and chaos that we saw last year, where we had, a lot of competitiveness at the start, even though it was, probably a bit more top-heavy than we usually see at the start of the season, where there's a lot of drivers that can really contend and compete, and it's fairly wide open, and then we see a compression kind of in the middle months, in the summer months, to like a core group usually of like 4 to 6 guys that kind of dominate before things level out again, or at least they tend to, in time for the playoffs in the fall. And the other typical thing which you began to allude to there was Hendrick was very fast at the start of the year, which is very typical. And since then, we've seen another typical pattern, which is that they kind of struggle by their standards in the summer, get a bit slower, and Toyota is on their usual summer hot stretch. They always seem to find some kind of magic, like especially in certain years, like 2015, 2019, and some other ones are some ones that really come to mind, But
2017 is the big one.
Yeah, but always right around like seems the time for the 600, and then right after that is when they seem to find this magic mysteriously, and they're just super fast for the next 3 or 4 months. And so that's kind of like the hierarchy right now. I would say this season has actually been fairly similar to last year in that when you look at, which I know it's not the best thing to look at, but when you look at laps led totals and the amount of different drivers that have been up front or contending for wins, it really has been just about as competitive as last year, but just in a more top-heavy kind of way. So that's kind of how I would summarize this season so far. Now, if I know Adam's not like our main analytical guy, but if we can, I'd like to let him speak.
Yeah, so kind of jumping off what Jake just said, I think that the season has had a different kind of hierarchy than we saw last year. Because last year we had probably 25 drivers who could win on any given week or who at least could compete for wins, which we haven't seen in many, many years. And this year it's more like we have, I don't know, 7 or 8 guys that are kind of have distanced themselves from the rest of the pack. And the middle class is like gone this year. Like if you look at the playoff cut line right now, the guys who are within 20, 30 points are having terrible seasons. It's like AJ Allmendinger, Austin Cindric. I mean, Daniel Suarez has been disappointing. Michael McDowell is right there. Like these are guys that in a normal season would have no business competing for a playoff spot. But this year, they are there. And that is partly because Bowman and Elliott have missed races, partly because there have been penalties handed out like candy. So, guys are artificially lower in the standings than they should be, which is raising these other guys up. But it's still not like last year where we had, a real solid, like from 12th to 20th, where there were real solid contending drivers. This year, that's just not the case. And I guess this is more normal. Last year was kind of a fluke. I think it was a product of the new car and people being unfamiliar with it. But now that the teams kind of have their arms around the car better, we're seeing more separation throughout the field. And frankly, I'm okay with it. I mean, last year was fun, but it was also, at some points, it was almost so random that it felt ridiculous. Whereas this year feels like a more normal distribution of results.
Yeah, it has been, though, still much better from a parity standpoint than I would say, any year before last year in quite some time, maybe since 2011 or so. Because I have Truex is leading TDR, but it's only at 163.88, which last year, after I've gone back and fixed it to put in the and I have done that now for a couple seasons, gone back and fixed to put the decimal average running positions in. Chase last year was a 150.74, but every year before that, going back to in most years, the leader is flirting with, if not exceeding 200. And let's see, 2019, Kyle Busch was a 183. 2020, it was about a 185. Harvick and Chase both really in a dead heat almost. It's very rare that you see the TDR leader for a season be under the 175 mark, and Truex at a 163 is the only driver over 150. So that's still very very good from a parity standpoint.
Yeah, it's almost like there's 8 to 10 guys that have separated themselves from the rest of the pack, but among those 8 to 10 at the top, there's a lot of parity. And like, there's no, I mean, I don't even know who the best driver. It's probably Larson or Truex, but like the fact that it's even a question this late in the year is a good sign.
But it's also like I guess, especially during the metric qualifying years, 2020 and 2021, you would have. It felt like the same guys ran up front every single week, and we're not really seeing that anymore. We'll have, and I guess part of that's because of the diversity of the schedule, and part of it's the new car, part of it's qualifying being back, but there will be Truex will have races like Sunday where he just doesn't show up. Larson will have those races. William Byron will have those races. Tyler Reddick. They've all they all have bad races usually, like at least once a month. Nobody is going out there and leading laps every single week or contending to win every single week the way we would see in the past. And that feels like something that with this field and the strength of the field, more teams coming into the series like Trackhouse and 2311 that are contending. That feels like something that could be sustainable for a while.
Yeah, that does seem to be a feature of the Gen 7 car also, is that for whatever reason, teams are not able to nail the setup every week as they were with the Gen 6 and the Gen 5 and the Gen 4 and every year before then. It's like, because you think about like the late 90s, for example, the top drivers almost never had bad weeks. They just ran in the top 5 and finished in the top 5 every week, no matter what the track was. But now with the Gen 7, yeah, it's very, from week to week, from track to track, teams will really hit or miss. And I think that's only good for the sport to have that kind of variation from race to race.
Yeah, and to further that point, now obviously, the amount of wins that drivers get in a season can, is something that's obviously very random and very attributable to luck or whatever. But still, the fact that last year we did not have anybody that won more than 4 on-the-road races last year, and the fact that there's a very good chance that we may not get anyone that has more than 5 or 6 this year is a really good sign. And the fact that it's taking a lot longer than usual for anyone to reach 1,000 laps led this year. Byron's the closest with a little over 700, when we already had a season where no one even reached 900 last year, are still both very good signs for the competition. Like I said, it's just as competitive as last year, but just in a less equitable way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nobody has more than 3 TDR wins this year either. Actually, you guys want to guess who the only driver with 3 is? It's probably not who you would expect. No cheating. That means you.
I'm trying to think. If the most, it's gonna be something.
Not Truex, and it's not Larson. I'll say that.
KFB.
No. Ross Chastain.
Oh.
Really?
Wow.
Yep. Dover, Darlington, and Nashville.
It makes sense. All right. Yeah. He was really good at Darlington. Should have won. Yeah, it makes sense.
He's only 7th overall, so.
Fine.
Kyle was also going to be my guess. Now, Ross Chastain does have the most races with the most lead shares, which is the statistic I invented to capture each driver's share of leading in a race, where later passes for the leader weighted more than earlier ones, and passing a lot helps you, while only passing like once in a given race does not. Chastain has had the most lead shares 3 times, so I'm not surprised by that, really. I'm a little cooler on Truex than the rest of you, because a lot of his passing has been through the field, not as much for the lead, although that's a much bigger criticism I have of Reddick this year than Truex. Truex has passed for the lead. He did dominate that Sonoma race, but it seems to me like JGR has over and over had unbeatable cars and then beat themselves. Chicago race being a major example, where Bell, Hamlin, and Truex all potentially had winning speed and all crashed. Truex crashing at Darlington. Hamlin getting beat at Kansas and then wrecking Larson for the win. I mean, seems like they should all be doing better than they are. To some extent, Truex has been unlucky, but I'm a little cooler. I think their cars are even more dominant than it looks like, and they're all kind of bring up Truex least. So yeah, I'd probably go with Larson for the best, because I just think that Hendrick is is really a mess. There are those races Byron was winning where he would just be slow on long green flag runs. The 9 and the 48 have been. I mean, they've had speed at times, but they've also had times where they just didn't do much of anything. Runs that were pretty invisible. Parsons had substantially more speed than his teammates. I'm less sure I'd say that about Truex. I think it's more that Hamlin and Bell are just screwing up more. I've been less excited by Truex all season. He's certainly done a lot more than I expected him to do, really ever again. And I know he still has James Small and stuff, but I know he had the best lead change percentage last year, but still, I feel his passing this year is unsustainable for some reason, even though I don't have statistical evidence for that.
Yeah, on that note, the guy whose season I'm really kind of down on, and it's funny because I'm usually, in the past, I've usually been a booster of him, is William Byron. I just feel like he's had a very track position dependent season and has not usually earned that track position by himself. I mean, the Coke 600 obviously being the prime example there, where he, quote, won the pole because of the metric qualifying and then kept getting the lead in the pits and getting passed every time. But his whole season, he has a pretty significantly negative pass differential, negative passing percentage, which the way I measure that is basically an average of passing percentage in each race. So it weighs every race equally. Otherwise, you'd be having a third of the passes in there accounted for would be super speedways. But he's negative in pretty much every passing statistic except for lead change shares, which is heavily emphasized as making the final pass, which he has, for whatever reason, been able to do. I guess both Las Vegas and Phoenix. But it feels almost like he hasn't even been better than he was last year. He's just been the opposite end of the luck spectrum. Speaking of which, I unfortunately do not have my luck statistics up to date on my metric there because I changed something in all the passing metrics to make it weighted based on absolute value of pass differentials, and that kind of really screwed up my luck metrics. So now I have to redo that, and I haven't really come up with a new formula for it yet. But if there's anybody who's been getting a lot of hype this year as being in that elite class, who I just, for whatever reason, don't feel like is going to be able to sustain it, then Byron would be that guy. I think the rest of the season kind of becomes more of a Larson, Truex, maybe Reddick if that team gets their shit together, and probably Chastain I would throw in there. I would say those four guys, if you put a gun to my head, would be my final four picks.
I'm starting to feel the same way about Byron. He is leading almost all of my statistics, and he has been for most of the year. He is leading in lead shares by far, which is usually something I weight very heavily. I usually prefer it and usually think it's more accurate than laps led, or my version of that cumulative races led, where I take the sum of the percentage of laps led in the race to even out races with differential laps. Usually I think lead shares is a lot more accurate than CRL, but Byron this year is like the ultimate counterexample. He is very high in lead shares because he keeps making passes at the end of the race, or passes on restarts where I'll make a pass on a restart and then I'll get past a couple laps later. I do think, unlike you, that he's significantly better than either of the previous 2 years, but I do think others are better than him. He does have a losing record in lead change percentage because of all those times Blaney passed him at Charlotte
and Gateway.
And there seems to be something missing there. I still I mean, I know Bowman is not doing much, but I still think he's probably closer to Bowman than Larson and Elliott overall, not this year, but overall.
Yeah, yeah. The other interesting thing about that, he leads in laps led this year, but he's only third, and barely ahead of Ross in my weighted percentage led, which is sort of like your CRL. I guess it would be CRL, except it's weighted towards taking passes later in the race, which shows that even with those races where Byron has won on late restarts, he's generally better in the beginning of the race than later on in it. And Larson and Truex are both pretty significantly ahead of him in that.
Yeah, the lion's share, like a lot of those statistics that I think that you're speaking of, can be explained by the overwhelming majority of them came in probably a handful at most of races out of the 18 we've had so far. And the other guys like Larson have been more balanced in it. They just haven't had as much throughout those races in those periods. I'm the one obviously that's more critical of him here. Some of it's for I don't know, I won't say personal reasons, but kind of competitive reasons and who I'm a fan of, but also just kind of objectively, I think I kind of have seen this trend from him through his career, and it's kind of the last 2 months this year has kind of almost been like an extreme version of it, almost like a satire of it, where that 600 race where he just kept getting the lead, on pit road and then losing it, and then Gateway where he got the lead on pit road, but then as soon as he got past, he just did nothing and was mid-pack. And then, a few other instances this year. And, look, I mean, he's been very fast at certain points this year, and he's done what he needed to at the right parts of races to win, and including Darlington where he got very lucky. But there's, he's car dependent. He's one of the most car dependent guys in the series. That's sort of why in the past I've kind of compared him a bit to Logano. Now, obviously, he doesn't drive like a douche like Logano and doesn't have the same personality, but profile-wise, as a driver, I see him as a bit similar, and that's something that's kind of bearing out so far this year. And
that's not a bad comparison.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, I am still high on him overall as a driver. I think he hasn't probably even reached his peak yet. And he just seems like he gets better every year. I just think the difference between what he's done this year and the last couple of years really is not that big. And I think, there's still another level that he can reach where, he can actually start racing the way that, his stats look like he is this year. But I just don't think he's quite there yet.
But yeah, the way I would put it, I said it before kind of, and I'll say it again. His strengths are different than what the strengths of someone like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Tyler Reddick, and, all that group are, where he's not, for a top-level NASCAR driver, a good passer, but, he's great on restarts, like when he got those 2 wins, and he has the best team, I think, in the sport. Like, Rudy Fugle is arguably the best crew chief in the sport right now. I mean, you can weigh the different factors. He makes great strategy calls, and he's bailed Byron out time after time this year when he's been in a bad situation, and his pit crew has been great. Even outside the Charlotte race where they got gifted that number 1 pit stall, they've gotten him out number 1 numerous times, and so he's being carried by his car, especially early in the season. Not as much now that Hendrick's kind of gotten slower and is in their summer mini slump. But it's fair to say that he's been very solid, but also been carried more than other guys have. And, like guys like, when Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott win a race, that they've earned it and they've done it the hard way. They've made lots of passes. They're passers. And Byron is a plotter. He takes advantage of situations, other guys making mistakes, circumstances, out of their control, and what the team does to help him. And that's, his profile right now. And that doesn't make him not good or not valid as a contender. It's just different, as I've said before.
He's a very, and I've said it before, he's a very Matt Kenseth-like driver. Smart, steady, doesn't cost himself, but he's also not a guy who really wows you. And I mean, Logano's another good comparison, and I think like Logano, he had that stretch 2014, 2015 where it was his cars and his team really carrying both he and Brad Keselowski. But then he had a year like last year where he was really overachieving, and I would say last year even probably the best year of his career. So that's kind of where I feel like Byron's trajectory could go. But yeah, in terms of his overall driving style, definitely this generation's Matt Kenseth, if there is one.
Been covered.
I don't need to go into the Chase Briscoe dead horse again, but he did finally have another above-average race this past weekend. Yay, baby steps.
I mean, just to think that Briscoe would effectively be someone in contention for a playoff spot, not for that penalty. Like, he was, 20th in points? Into that? Like it was before.
Yeah, and then the other funny thing is Josh Bilicki is now part of my big board because he's on pace to make 10 starts this year, and 3 of them have been on road courses, which have bumped him up a bit, and he is, laugh at this, but he's ahead of Austin Cindric, Noah Gragson, Austin Dillon, Chase Briscoe, and Harrison Burton out of full-time drivers in decent equipment.
Hey, shout out. He corresponded with you on Twitter.
Yeah, I guess he name searches himself or something, and liked my tweet that pointed that out, even though I didn't even tag him. But
yes, yeah, I mean, everybody's headed Gragson at this point. If you're a full-time team, you're headed Gragson.
Harrison Burton is now the worst. Briscoe finally passed him. Oh wait, Ty Dillon. I forgot all about him.
I mean, competitive equipment.
Consider that.
Yeah, even still, he'd be last.
Anyway, one guy I'd like to point out who's been having a horrible year statistically is Eric Jones, because Legacy Motor Club has been just pathetic this year ever since they found out that they're switching to Toyota. Chevy pulled all their manufacturer support, and they've been running like shit. But Eric Jones has the 3rd highest pass differential this season, and it's only 1 pass behind Reddick for 2nd. So I think he's been better than his cars have allowed him to show, and he's had runs like the Coke 600 where he was in the top 10, I think, and then had a mechanical problem. So yeah, I think that he's kind of been forgotten about this year just because the cars are so bad, but I think he's still a solid, well-placed driver on talent, right around there, 12th to 15th. And I think next year when they're with Toyota, he'll start to compete for wins again.
Yeah, he's hovering basically like right at average for TDR right now at 99.09, which is a lot worse than last year. But I also thought last year his season was really inflated in my metrics by having Ty Dillon as his teammate. Granted, Bragson this year has not been much better, but he's been closer to Jones than Dillon was, and I definitely don't think Jones has been any worse, really. He's just, the cars aren't as good, and he's clearly been punching above his weight in them. Even the other day, he had that embarrassing early, the very first lap, he took out Brad and Gragson, but then after that, he kind of methodically worked his way through and ended up finishing pretty well. And it seems like when he doesn't have any issues, he ends up having a pretty good race, so yeah, I definitely looking at him as a prime bounce back candidate next year. And I mean, last year was really the outlier metric wise. He's basically hovering right about where he was in all his Gibbs years, when he was just above average, if even that. So yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I saw was on the road courses. There's been, I think it was Chris Buescher has finished top 10 or something like that in the last, I think almost all the Gen 7 road races. And I think he kind of is a sleeper, but really, at this point, a really, really good road racer. Finds ways at the front, finds ways to avoid the chaos into these races.
He's another guy I felt like has been having a really overlooked season in general, which, even though he's like 11th in points on merit, seems like nobody's really talking about him, and he's now ahead of his teammate in TDR. I know that'll make you very happy. I think there's a case you could say he's had a better season than Brad at this point because road courses are part of the schedule. And
to be fair, I will give Brad a little bit of credit that the F1 incident was not his fault. But still wasn't a race. Some of the other
someone else who drove himself straight into the tire barrier on like the first 3 laps.
Oh yeah, sad. Sad Kyle Busch noises. And other people too, I guess.
Not even who I was talking about, but
I know who you're talking about. I'm not the pole sitter.
Yep.
There's always Coda for Brad. That's his. It was good at Sonoma, I guess, for him. He didn't have any wrecks there. I don't think he spun anybody out, so I guess he's proving.
It's pretty hard to believe that there was like once a point in time where Brad would contend for the win every year at Watkins Glen, and I mean, he was never
almost won 3 in a row. 2011 to 2013, he was close to doing it.
But I mean, now the guy's just total joke on road courses. I mean, might honestly be the worst road course driver in the field of any full-time driver.
At this point, well, Noah Gragson exists.
Eric Almirola also exists, but then again,
that's true. It's a fight.
Somehow won that Xfinity race, Sonoma. But,
yeah, I mean, it just depends on where you're like Coda. Brad's Coda was what Gragson was this weekend. And except he knocked people out of the race, lap 1, doing it. So,
right.
Including.
I don't think we need to talk about the dead horse anymore.
Yeah, let's move up there. There's been a few other disappointments just outside of those guys and guys that haven't been good, and not even just drivers, but key parts of NASCAR that are not related to a driver or a team. And that thing being Fox. I'm glad we are done with that. And, I mean, there's so much you could talk about with just how bad those broadcasts were with onboard shots when there was a battle for the lead from the 5th place car. Misinformation of the facts. I mean, that's not always their fault. Guys constantly bringing up whenever they get the chance to do it. So it was just almost felt like it was biased towards the Fords. And I don't know if that was so much in Clint wanting to do that, but he was very much leaning towards certain former teammates. And
I don't know. I thought I liked him his first year there when he and Gordon were together, and then he just, I don't know.
He and Gordon had a weird chemistry, which is funny.
Yeah, they did. And now it's like,
I think now that he's gone, it's I think he kind of followed under Gordon's wing, and now that he's gone, he's kind of what do I do now?
It's like, I mean, really, all he was doing this year is basically cheerleading for the SHR cars. And
yeah, I'm not going to spend much time talking about that other than obviously NBC has their own issues like the over dramatizing of things and pushing certain storylines that are as obvious. Yeah, as obvious as can get. And whatever, but that I don't think there's really any way that you can not say that they have been massively better than Fox was this year. You could maybe question it in the previous years, but this year there's no doubt in my mind because the commercials have been better timed, the coverage has been much more thorough, and like I was gonna say it last week, but I just never got around to it. I forgot when the time came. To me, like the thing that defined the difference between Fox and NBC for me and their coverage was, how much Fox, how much stuff that they miss, important stuff, pertinent stuff that, that not only will they miss it, but they'll completely not even mention it, and you just basically have to guess as to what happened. There was one point during the Nashville race where they were showing in triple boxes, 3 different battles for position.
Right.
Once they were showing the lead between Truex and Denny Hamlin. They showed, I think it was Larson and Eric Jones fighting for 9th and 10th, and I think and Ross Chastain and Christopher Bell fighting for 5th and 6th, all on the same screen, 3 different battles at one time. Fox, you're lucky to see one battle. at most of the race with them. And so that, just having Junior alone makes them better than Fox, in my opinion. But then you throw everything else on top of that, they're just far superior. But that's a horse, another dead horse that gets beat plenty enough outside of here between other people. I mean, you can read about it in social media, go on YouTube, whatever. So there's really not much more that needs to be said about that. So I'll just, since we're talking, I guess, about disappointments of the season, I guess we'll let Sean say that and then kind of move on to maybe the last part, because I don't want this show to go on all night. I've been enjoying it, but we do kind of need to get going a little bit.
That's what I was just going to interject, though, really quick, though, about NBC's coverage. Can we just, have Mike Bagley on there every week? Just hire him away from MRN and make him the lead announcer. The guy's great. Like, just the enthusiasm that he gives and the descriptive words. It's just like, take notes, guys. This is how a real professional does things.
No comment on the broadcasts because I dropped cable right after the Southern 500 last year, and I've been listening to all the races on the radio, so I can't comment about that. I did want to say a few things about those drivers you were talking about. Okay, Byron has the fastest speed this year, which imply, even though I think JGR is faster, I think his car is substantially faster than the other Hendrick cars this year, and that is mostly due to Fugel, and I would say he probably is the best crew chief right now post Hearn, and that is a large reason for Byron's success. I think Fugel is more elite than Byron is and more complete at his role at the moment, but Byron still may be able to get there. Eric Jones is 6th among Cup drivers in my model this year. Now, that is more because Noah Gragson is bad and a rookie than because Jones is good, but I think this might be his highest year in my model ever, so I don't think he's fallen off. It's just that he hasn't had competitive cars. Yes, I think he was better last year, but I don't think he is much worse now, and I think that the cars have just been ticking time bombs, and I don't even think Gregson is as bad as he has looked, although he is still bad. As for Buescher, I mean, he's become a joke in my model because he was the highest rated Cup driver in my model in 2021 because he blew out a washed up Ryan Newman, but he has been in the top 10 in my model every year since 2019, and he's on pace to do so again. I was hoping that I was hoping that Brad Keselowski would outperform him because the Penske drivers were so underrated in my model because Keselowski had to compete against Gordon and Johnson in his very early years and Kurt Busch, who all blew him out. And Joey Logano was blown out by Hamlin and Kyle Busch in his early years. So both Keselowski and Logano were way underrated in my model, and that caused every Penske driver the past 15 years to be underrated. I was hoping that if Keselowski could beat Buescher by enough that maybe that would fix that. But no, I mean, they've basically been equal. I would say Brad's been better at ovals. The thing is, Brad can still battle for the lead on ovals sometimes, and Chris just seems so tentative. He doesn't have the top end speed, but he seems to have a higher floor than almost anyone, especially the mid pack guys. So I really have never known what to make of him.
I think Brad right now is just a really pretty good short track racer. That's his best not to win. Richmond, Bristol, Martinsville. Those are, I would say, his 3 best tracks right now. And you have to play tracks, but he's actually had winning speed there, even last year, Bristol at least. So at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what do you have left on the schedule and who's going to outperform who. There is some opportunities for Buescher to do it. There's also opportunities for Brad on the short tracks to, if he's aggressive, to kind of get himself ahead and really kind of solidify himself number one. Is my take, at least what I've seen so far.
All right. Adam, anything you had to say here? Okay.
I think you guys have pretty much covered everything.
All right, then. I guess should we go on to previewing next week?
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna ask if you want to do any kind of like lower series a quicker, briefer summarization of like any lower series stuff, just like a breeze through. This would be the time to do it.
I haven't followed much in trucks at all, so I couldn't tell you much there.
Trucks have been pretty much shit show all year. I guess Hocevar, in my opinion, has been the best driver there. He's the TDR leader. I don't really know if there's any favorite there, but Xfinity, I think it's kind of slowly becoming a two-horse race between Nemechek and Custer, both drivers who have Cup experience and, in my opinion, are Cup caliber drivers. We'll get to see Custer back there the next couple of weeks, although who knows how competitive he'll be able to be. But it has,
those
as I was saying,
SHR limit. Those
I don't know. I think it's a proper wear car, but who knows? Whatever. All I was saying last year about how he wasn't the problem there. That's I've been, I think, vindicated on that with how bad SHR has been this year and how he's really emerged these past couple months as a favorite for the championship there. But yeah, not really a whole lot to say. I'll admit though that the quote win from Saturday where it didn't even get to halfway, that was pretty Mickey Mouse. Even though he led.
The one thing I'll say was I think he was going to win that race anyways. It was, from what I was there for, I wasn't there for the whole race, but he was far and away just kind of his own zip code. I did not see him losing unless there was some sort of a pit penalty or a horrible stop that, pushed him all the way back to 10th or something. I don't think he was going to lose that race.
Still, I mean, it barely even counts as a race.
Barely does, but I'd rather him had done that. Done it every lap and won the whole thing.
It's better that the dominant guy won that as opposed to
Mickey Mouse back marker.
Random Jeremy Clements win out of nowhere, or random Anthony Alfredo. Yeah, it's
you're talking.
Yeah, I know that Adam doesn't watch those races and those series, so I guess Sean, what's your kind of brief summarization of the lower series stuff this year?
Yeah, I don't have much to say about it. I'll just Creed was the only person who seemed to have any speed that might have been able to challenge Custer, and at this point with Creed, he's going to win. I know he's going to win at some point, but it's hard for me to ever pick him to win any specific race because he seems to take himself out, and a lot of times it's not his fault, but it's hard for me to predict that it will actually happen. So I think Custer is going to win regardless. Also, but I'm fine that they cut that short, honestly, because if they hadn't, it just would have gotten even worse.
Yeah, season long.
There was one other Xfinity guy I was going to briefly mention, and not exactly in a good way, but Brandon Menard's just having a absolute disaster of a season, both results-wise and performance-wise. He's still pretty safely in position to miss the playoffs, right? Yeah, and he's even worse than that in TDR. He's below average at 91.66, below names such as Brett Moffitt and Jeb Burton. And, it's not pretty.
I mean, yeah, he's, at this point, it's. I would say it's pretty close to having to win to get in for him. He has a shot to point it if he really gets going these next couple weekends, but I have no reason to believe that. I think at this point he's already in a win to make it.
I mean, I've been considering in the past couple of years like a better version of Herbst, but I'm not even sure he's that at this point. Those Gibbs cars were just pumping him up all that time, and Junior Motorsports as a whole, though, has been kind of down, I felt like. I mean, Ross Berry, the supposed next Ross Chastain, he hasn't exactly been lighting it up. Allgaier's been really the only one who's been contending for wins. Yeah, I guess that's enough on that. Really not a whole lot of interesting things to say about that series right now.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really been into it much myself, so I'm not even going to really bother. Anything that I would have to say, I've said before already. So we're not going to do like a 2-week preview this time because I don't want the show to really go over 2 hours. But in Loudon's a damn Harvick track anyway, so I don't want to even talk about it. But we can try to look at forward to Atlanta. So let's do that.
Yeah, hoping we can, just like the last Atlanta race there, get like a bullshit-free weekend. No rain issues or anything like that, and not a bunch of wrecks. More 90s 2000s Daytona style race. And then as far as who's going to win, screw it. Since he came so close last time, or the summer race there last year, I'm going to say Corey LaJoie.
I'm going to go bold and say he has a good shot to win the 2. At least be up there. I'm not going to pick a winner yet. LaJoie should be, that's his best track. And he's had legit winning speed there, and I don't see a reason why he couldn't win there. I'm just really excited for it to be under the lights. It's been a long time since we've had a race at Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
Under the lights. That's going to be fun, just the whole throwback to it. And I think the racing is going to be pretty good, just as a result of that. I think that could really add a little something to the day to night. It's a play track, so I don't know, but it'll make some of a difference, which will be fun. It's one of the last shots for some of those guys to get in and get a win that'll put them in. LaJoie is one of those guys. At least outside the bubble, LaJoie, other Ford guys, which I don't know if rest of Fords will be. I guess they won last time, so they should be fast. Cindric was pretty fast last time, so I would be shocked if he was actually a contender too. But it'll be a fun race, and I think it's going to be a good mix of usual suspects up there and some kind of guys that are going to have their last shot to win. It's going to be fun, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this race, especially because it's at night, like Jimmy just said, because we haven't had an Atlanta race at night since what? Like 2014, 15 maybe? It's been a long time. And Atlanta is definitely the most like straightforward of the drafting tracks now, where it's like in none of the 3 races have we had huge wrecks and ridiculous finishes and all that stuff that we have at Daytona and Talladega to a lesser degree. And so I'm really looking forward to just seeing the drafting chess match without all the bullshit and crashing that comes with it. I do think Ford is probably going to be really fast here. I mean, they were the fastest manufacturer in the spring, and Logano led over half the race. So I don't really see any reason why that would change. I do hope that in the first 2 stages we don't have quite as much single file as we had in the spring, because we had a train of single file for 50, 60 laps at a time. That was kind of but overall, yeah, I really like the new Atlanta, and I'm looking forward to this race.
Well, yeah, first, on the note of Corey LaJoie, I just want to give him a brief shout-out because he did have definitely his best road course / street course run that he's ever had, which he ended up finishing 14th, which is about where he ran the whole time. And for him and that team, that's great. Too damn bad that his one big chance to better his position came in at Gateway, but whatever, that's how the ball rolls. As far as Atlanta goes, I think it'll be a little better than the race we had in March, which I didn't see the first half of it, but as I understand it, it was kind of just Logano leading everybody in a train for much of it. I think one thing that will help with that is, we've got more guys that are desperate to win races this far in the season and lock themselves into the chase will be one thing. And then the race being later, which I know that it wasn't hot, in the March race, obviously, but this race being at night, which for one thing is better than the fans. I'm glad they made that decision, just like they did at Nashville for that reason. But also, if it had been during the day and in the middle of the heat, this would have been a lot more of a race where they kind of run together for a few laps and then they get very split apart. And there's lots of single file racing because everyone's kind of afraid, to spin or wreck. So that'll help it as well. It probably will be still a Ford-centric race like that one was, but maybe not as much because maybe some teams will have figured more things out now. And I agree with everything else that's been said, that Atlanta definitely has been the most fair of the super speedway races since its reconfiguration. All three of the results of the races we've had there so far have been very fair and very representative of how where guys ran throughout it, and that's definitely a good thing. But it's a double-edged sword because it's probably not going to be as thrilling as you can get the highs that you get from a race like Daytona and Talladega, and it's going to be more track position dependent. You're not going to be able to just fall back to 20th or whatever and work your way up the field just like that. It's not going to happen. You gotta, if you don't start at the front, you're going to have to gradually work your way up there and then hang on to the track position you've got. But all that being said, Ford's will probably be fastest. Like Blaney's a decent choice, and Logano's certainly one as well. But for a few different reasons, I'm going to pick William Byron because, for one, he's very good at. He's one of the best drafting guys that there is. He's very good at hanging on to track position, as we were talking about earlier, at any track. And also because I've been doing this for 2.5 years with our game where we pick drivers, and I still yet to pick one correct. And I figure, being a Larson fan, I'll kind of jinx him a little bit by doing that. So a few different reasons for that, some valid, some not, but I'm going to say Byron wins. I think it'll be a decent race.
I'm also expecting Ford domination. I don't see why that wouldn't continue after Keselowski and Buescher were the top two lap leaders in the Daytona 500, and then the Penske cars utterly dominated the first Atlanta race. I think this will probably be better than that one because it's at night, which I think is often better for drafting races. I'm sorry, trying to decide between which Ford team. I'm not going to bet anything on any of the SHR drivers, although if Almirola's ever going to do anything again, that's his best shot probably, so that would be the underdog I would be most likely to see, and that would be really annoying, but I think Ryan Blaney is overdue for a plate win, and with the Ford speed, it's going to be him.
I mean, I think I look at this. I think half of SHR will be bad for them to be at the front. Now they kind of have a pick. One of you might want to mute your mic. I think it'll be Harvick. No other reason than Atlanta does feel like a place he'd probably get his final win. As we touched on before, but also last March he was winning the whole race before he put himself out of the lead. I feel like that's just been a track, regardless of the configuration and what's going on. He's always been good there. And it just feels inevitable. He's going to win a race this year, whether we like it or not. And this kind of feels like the time he's going to do it. It's come close a couple times this year, and this will probably be his one win he gets this year. And I think with the Ford just being good as a whole, kind of have some help up there. So I guess I'll say Harvick for this weekend.
Yeah, I mean,
my ass, be his final win.
My ass is definitely puckered for the next 2 weeks because I know what happened in March, and I know what Loudon represents. So if and whenever he does win, it'll hurt. But it's like what Brian from my Family Guy said to Stewie that time. I'll bitch and moan, then I'll beg for my apple juice, go poop, and then fall asleep. And then I'll probably leave the server for a week and then be back and then whatever. So, but yeah. I think that pretty much covers that event. So since this is kind of a special occasion, this show I kind of would like, if everyone can, to just kind of give one last, just kind of random or miscellaneous thought they want to give before we go. I mean, it can be about literally anything or whatever, so just kind of a chance to touch base. So just whatever you want to say.
Denny Hamlin has 0 championships.
I was gonna say a different driver. We could do that, or we could do SHR continuing to think further and further towards irrelevance starting next year.
I will just say that Phoenix should absolutely not be the championship race, and I think it's complete bullshit that they're getting it again in 2024. This was NASCAR's chance to right their wrong and give it back to Homestead, but they did not. So I hope that will change in 2025.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of money being thrown at. I think Arizona, something there is throwing a bunch of money at NASCAR to do it, and that's why they're never. At least not going to change for a long time. I think it's now. Well, the other problem is it's selling out 5 months in advance, so we'll see. But it'll be a while.
Yeah, it is what it is. I could rant about it, but I don't even really feel like it's not going to change anything. So, Sean, anything that you had like random miscellaneous, could be anything.
Anything would just be beating on one of my own dead horses, so no.
So yeah, is that? I guess that does it for all you guys then.
Yeah, I mean, I think this weekend did prove that there may be a future for street racing at some capacity. Maybe not, obviously not like a supercars or F1 thing where it's every other week, but I do think it kind of proved that street racing is a part of this sport. And just, I don't know, if you were to go back in time and tell fans in 2018 or something that 5 years from now we'll be racing on a street course, dirt track, among other things, and that's just other things that have, almost 10 different new tracks, I'd laugh at your face if you said that. It's kind of incredible to see how far we've come in the last couple of years in terms of scheduling, cars, a product, everything. It's really cool to see.
Anything else from anybody?
Not really.
I did 0 Daytona 500 wins.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my dad, he went to a Daytona 500. I don't know which one it was that he went to because I can never get a straight answer because I think he was falling down drunk the whole time. I think he said it was the one that, it was 1990, the one where Derek Cope won after Earnhardt. Legend hasn't ran over a chicken bone, but every time that he says he says it's a different year, or that, one building was there or wasn't there, so I think he was in and out during that time. So, but I know that I'm glad you went there, and you apparently were lucid for it. So, and I hope you get to experience it again. All right then. For all the guys, for Ryan, Adam, Sean, Jack/Jimmy fan, and myself, Jake. Thanks from all of us for your support and for helping us through this first half of this season. We really appreciate it, all the engagements and the viewership that we've gotten, and we hope to continue to have more of it and just build on it in the future. Really enjoyed this mid-season report. I thought for a while we weren't going to be able to get 5. I wanted to get 5 originally, and then it looked like we weren't going to get it. Then it looked like we might. Then it looked like we wouldn't get it again. And then it still looked like it wouldn't happen today, but then at the last minute, Jimmy was able to join, and all these guys were able to be here. Yeah, and we were able to have that big festive party that I wanted, and so I'm glad that show really went well. Felt like I had a good flow. I think we delegate everything really well, so I'm happy about that. And this is the show I'm going to be very proud to put out there. Probably won't be doing 5 again until the end of the season. Again, I don't want to do it too often, but it's nice to be able to do it when we can. So appreciate you guys coming on here and helping out. Be sure to like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Comment, because that helps us more than anything in the algorithm, help us to get more views and more engagements. Follow us on Twitter at TRC Podcast 1. Follow Ryan and his analytics at RJM Analytics. I think Sean's handle is at Racer Metrics, I believe. He's got a lot of great stuff himself on there. He's a legend, and been that way for a long time in the racing community, and that's well deserved. So be sure to check him out as well. Thank all you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.